Let's talk about some good news on the election horizon, because like justice, hope and optimism also matter. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So the poll numbers look pretty undeniable at the moment. Now, I know polls are not foolproof. We've been here before, right? But the numbers have Joe Biden ahead, and more importantly, Donald Trump behind, in Arizona, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Georgia, in Florida, in North Carolina, in Texas. I mean, pretty much everywhere. But what caught my attention today was an article by the Cook Political Report. Here's the headline to that article. Almost 100 days out, Democrats are favored to take back the Senate. And the article goes on to talk about how the Dems are poised to make substantial gains in the House and, of course, take the White House. I recommend the article to you. It's got a lot of data in it. It's by the Cook Political Report. The question becomes, what will Donald Trump and Bill Barr and Mike Pompeo do between now and November to try to overcome what the polls are telling us? And when you look at what they've been doing and talking about and giving speeches about over the past few weeks, I would contend that this sort of 6-point plan is emerging. And none of this will come as a surprise, but here's what I think Trump's 6-point plan is looking like at this moment. Number one, slow the mail down, right? Trump doesn't really buy into the whole neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays the couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds thing. Donald Trump doesn't buy into that whole thing, so he's trying to slow the mails down. That feeds into point number two. Trump is whining and complaining incessantly that voting by mail is rife with fraud. It isn't. But he is trying to take full advantage of hampering any efforts for voters to actually cast their ballot by mail. Number three, attempt to shut down polling places in Democratic strongholds. No surprise there. Number four, try to intimidate people from voting by sending your stormtroopers, maybe we should call them storm trumpers, to the polls, right? That's an effort to deter voters, to chill voters, to intimidate voters, and we suspect we're going to see that. Number five, whip up civil unrest to instill fear and anxiety in the voters because maybe that will deter them from going to the polls. And we've seen Trump and Bill Barr sending these federal forces to select cities to try to whip up civil unrest. And number six, which is perhaps the worst of all, is to allow the coronavirus to flourish, unchecked, unaddressed in the United States, right? No concerted federal effort or action to tamp it down or control it, and hope that if things are really bad in November on the public pandemic front, people will be less likely to get out to the polls and vote. But I suggest that even the Trump administration knows that this 6-point plan will fail. Trump will be defeated in November. So they know that their anti-voting strategy is not a winning one. They know Trump will lose in November. So right now, what it looks like Trump and Bill Barr and Mike Pompeo and the other sycophants are cooking up is a policy that can be summed up in 3 words. China is bad, right? Now, how are Trump, Barr, and Pompeo putting all of their eggs in the China is bad basket? Well, they're doing a couple of things. The first thing they're doing is they're trying to convince the American people that China intentionally sent the coronavirus to the United States to kill us. So they then argue that, well, Joe Biden has been soft on China. He's been in league with China his whole career. So if you believe number one, China sent the virus here intentionally to attack us, and you believe number two, Joe Biden is soft on China, therefore, number three, you should vote for Donald Trump. Well, the whole thing is absurd. And, the Washington Post headlines recently have read, among other things, Trump's China policy has no strategy except to boost his re-election campaign. And here's the other thing. Let me just add a footnote to that three-part argument. If China sent the coronavirus here intentionally to attack us, then Donald Trump is an absolute, abject, miserable failure at defending the American people against that Chinese attack. Of course, China didn't send the virus here intentionally to attack us, and Joe Biden isn't soft on China, so that whole argument just falls apart. It falls under the weight of its own frivolity. The other thing, though, that Trump, Barr, and Pompeo are trying to accomplish with the China is bad policy is that when Donald Trump loses in November, they want to be able to blame his loss on Chinese interference in our elections. Think about it. Just a few months ago, Chinese President Xi was Donald Trump's best friend. That's my man. Donald Trump put President Xi right up there with Putin and Erdogan and MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and his really good friend Kim Jong-un, right? And now, a couple of months later, Donald Trump is saying President Xi is our worst enemy because he sent the coronavirus here intentionally to attack us. Boy, what a difference a couple of months and 145,000 dead Americans make. What are Trump, Barr, and Pompeo doing to sort of further their China is bad narrative? Well, it ranges from seriously overblown rhetoric on the one end of the spectrum to just outright lies on the other end of the spectrum. Bill Barr, for example, recently gave a speech, and he said, among other things, that China is trying to steal the American dream and replace it with the Chinese solution. Well, come on, sport. Then, a couple of days ago, Bill Barr announced he was hoping to great fanfare that his Department of Justice indicted 2 hackers that were working on behalf of or in league with, or maybe they had once met members of the Chinese government, and they were trying to steal information about the development of a coronavirus vaccine, until you realize these 2 hackers were piddly little nobodies. They really were not connected to the Chinese government, but, they were 2 Chinese men, so I guess that was good enough for Bill Barr. But, Mike Pompeo may be the worst of all. So Mike Pompeo gave a speech just the other day at the Richard Nixon Library, and here's the headline coming out of that speech. At Nixon Library, Pompeo declares China engagement a failure. So he gave a speech that was all about how the last 40 or 50 years that have seen the U.S. trying to engage with China, it is an absolute failure. Mike Pompeo could have opened his remarks at the Nixon Library by saying, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. I am the chief diplomat for the United States and all of my efforts to engage with China have been an absolute failure. You know, Mike Pompeo is to diplomacy what David Duke is to racial harmony. Mike Pompeo is to diplomacy what Mike Pence is to inclusivity. Mike Pompeo is to diplomacy what Mitch McConnell is to timely, empathetic legislation to help Americans who are struggling. What Mike Pompeo doesn't know about diplomacy could fill a book. Along those lines, there was an article authored by Richard Haass. Now, if you don't know who Richard Haass is, he's the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. He used to be with the State Department. He's a former diplomat. He used to be with the Department of Defense, and he is a true expert on the issues of diplomacy and foreign policy. So he wrote an article titled, "What Mike Pompeo Doesn't Understand About China, Richard Nixon, and U.S. Foreign Policy." And I highly recommend this article to you because Richard Haass knows what he's talking about. I'm going to quote just two short passages from Richard Haass's recent article. He takes on Pompeo's bluff and bluster and abject failure as the U.S.'s chief diplomat. And he says, among other things, that Pompeo's tough talk on China might have greater impact if he were equally tough on Russia, on Turkey, on Saudi Arabia. And Richard Haass concludes his piece by saying, quote, "Theodore Roosevelt advised the United States to speak softly and carry a big stick. This president and his chief diplomat, Mike Pompeo, are perilously close to getting it backward." Yeah. So Trump and Barr and Pompeo's China is bad strategy will fail. It's laughable. You know what will win? You know what will succeed? The American voters getting to the polls in November in numbers too big to rig. And then come January, the accountability begins. Folks, please stay safe. I look forward to talking with you all again soon.